Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Lam here. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the Fujifilm X-T3 and the things that you want to know before purchasing this camera. Now, obviously, this is built up quite a bit. Nowadays, I use my X-T3 mostly for video purposes, but it is a great all-around camera. It's won many awards, so let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is whether or not the X-T3 is actually the best choice for you if you're on a budget. If the budget isn't a concern to you, then I would say go right ahead and get the X-T3 and get a camera lens like the 18-55 f2.8 f4 because this is a terrific lens. It's a great starter lens. Now, if budget is a concern to you, then what you want to do is you might want to consider the X-T2. Now, there are some caveats to my recommendation of the X-T2 specifically for video. If you want to record video and you also want to use autofocus, then I would recommend you go straight to the X-T3. Now, if you can do video without autofocus, then the X-T2 is still a really great camera system. If you're just a photographer, I believe that the X-T2 and the X-T3, they balance out really well. You're getting a marginal increase in image quality for the X-T3, but it's really hard to tell. And you are getting a better focusing system with the X-T3, but I don't think the X-T2 is a slouch and I don't think it would let you down. The reason why I say the X-T2 is because if you were to buy that camera body used, you would save a ton of money and then you can actually upgrade to a better lens. For instance, if you can only buy the X-T3 with a 16-55, so the plastic lens, or the 15-45, which is the smaller plastic lens, these two lenses are okay, but I would say that you're not getting the full Fujifilm experience. It's not until you upgrade to the 18-55, and I actually have two of these because these lenses are this good. This is a terrific lens. I don't think you'll ever get rid of it because it's such a great and versatile lens. So what I'm basically saying here is that the glass is always more important than the camera body. Camera bodies, they usually come and go, but the glass, you usually have them for a lifetime as long as you're within the same ecosystem. So I would definitely say invest in the glass if you get a chance to. The next thing that you would want to know if you're actually new to the Fujifilm camera systems is that the battery life on these cameras generally aren't very good. We're still relying on an old battery design and Fujifilm has refused to update that. What that means is that if you turn on all of the features that you want, your battery life isn't going to be very good and you'll probably wind up carrying 2 to 3 batteries with you. And to compound that problem, most of the aftermarket batteries aren't really good either. They kind of expand on you and they don't really last very long. There is one good solution to this problem, and it's the fact that there is a USB-C port on the side of the camera and you can actually charge and use the camera off of a battery bank. This is something that I do all of the time. I'll just go ahead and stick my USB-C battery bank in my pocket, run the USB-C cord to my camera, and I can run the camera all day long off of that power bank with just one battery in the camera without any issues. Keep in mind though, if you do this very often, it is very tough on that battery and you're going to wear out that battery significantly sooner. Also, if you're going to do this, I definitely recommend a Fujifilm battery inside the camera. Some of the aftermarket batteries do not work well with a power bank plugged into the camera. So just be aware that you do want to use the official battery if you're going to be using a power bank along with it. The next item I want to talk to you about is how Fujifilm exposes their images, whether it's for photo or video. What you're going to see out on YouTube is a lot of people comparing Fujifilm to other cameras, and they're going to tell you that it's underexposed. So I'm going to go ahead and break this down into 2 points so that when you actually see these videos, you're aware of it. Number one, if you feel like your image is underexposed, changing the ISO is the worst way to actually solve the problem. What you want to do is you want to use the exposure compensation dial on your cameras, and they're readily available on all Fujifilm bodies. All you have to do is bump that up, you let in more light, and that solves the problem. ISO is by far the worst way to solve that problem. I just want to make that very clear. I really don't understand why they bump ISO as a means to solve this problem because it is by far the worst decision. There are definitely far better options like changing shutter speed, changing your aperture, using a different lens, using a tripod. There are just a number of different ways to change the exposure on your image rather than bump the ISO. So that's something that I want to make clear. Point number 2 that I want to make on this subject is that a lot of people feel like Fujifilm underexposing their images is a bad thing or it's a detriment to the image. and that's not necessarily true. The reason why I say this is because a lot of people actually underexpose their images to protect the highlights of the image. In other words, they don't want the image to be too overexposed because you will lose color information and it's unrecoverable. Whereas if the exposure is a little bit dark, you can always boost the highlights to regain some of that color information. The opposite is not true. The second thing, and the more important thing that I want to talk about, is that exposure is not a science. It's actually an art form. The reason why I say that is because when you look at exposures, two things usually happen. Either you have too little light, in which case, it's a low light situation, or you can have too much light, like you're actually shooting outside in high noon where the sun is just blazing down at you. In that type of scenario, you have entirely way too much light. So what I want to say about this is that when a camera system is slow to expose, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So a lot of these test scenarios that people are doing, they're always in low light situations. So the thing that I want you to remember when you're actually watching these reviews and they're telling you about underexposure is that they're always testing it under low light situations. They're not testing it in the opposite direction, which is what happens when there's actually too much light. At that point, would having a camera or a sensor system that actually exposes a little bit slower be beneficial? Here is what I will say about taking pictures in bright sunlight. If you actually have to use the shutter speed at 1/8000th of a second, you're going to notice that you're going to be losing detail in your images. And the reason for that is because the sensor has to capture all of that information in 1/8000th of a second. That's a lot of information to try to read in less than a blink of an eye. So think about this for a second. You definitely want a lower shutter speed so that the sensor can read more of that data and then capture it into a file. At that point, a sensor that actually exposes a little bit more slowly is going to be more beneficial because it's going to allow you to lower that shutter speed down. Because you always have to think about it in two halves. Either you have too little light or you have too much light. We account for one side, but if you don't account for the other, that doesn't make a great camera system. So these are the things that you should consider when you watch these reviews and people are telling you, oh, it underexposes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It is a thing. You definitely need to recognize it does that, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. So just be aware of that when you actually listen to people about exposures. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is accessories for your X-T3, and this is one of the things that I kind of don't like, which is the fact that most accessories are going to be coming from Fujifilms. In other words, the accessory market for the Fujifilm system isn't really as big as for Canon or for Nikon, in which they just have a huge range of accessories. Most of the lenses that you're going to buy for your Fujifilm systems will come directly from Fuji. There's really not that many aftermarket lenses that are really good for this system. So that's something to be really aware of because most of the Fujifilm lenses, they are not inexpensive. There are definitely really good quality ones at a reasonable price, but you're just not going to find the same affordable lenses that you would for Nikon or for Canon, and that's really important. Now, there are examples of accessories that are just highly overpriced, like for example, the X-T3 battery grip. It's going to set you back over $300, and it's a very simple accessory. Other camera brands like Canon and Nikon, they're going to have aftermarket battery grips that you can get for $50 to $70, which is very reasonably well priced. But unfortunately for Fujifilms, the market is just not big enough. So if you actually want a battery grip for your X-T3, you're going to pony up at least $230, in which case that's the price of a used one, which is a lot of money for a battery grip. So that's something to be really well aware of, is that if there are going to be certain accessories or certain lenses that you want, you definitely want to price them out first, because they can add up very quickly. Now, as far as details on image quality, low light, and all that stuff, there are other reviews out there that go into great detail, and they'll do a better job than I will. I simply just don't care because I look at the image as a whole. I don't pixel peep, and if I like the image that's coming out of the camera, that's good enough for me, because most people, they don't care about pixel peeping or looking really closely. They look at the whole image, and as long as the whole image presents itself really well, then that's all I really care about. And in 2019, all of the major camera brands, they make great cameras for photography. Now for video, a few of them gimp on it, but Fujifilm does not do that. So I am very happy to report, if you love video, Fujifilm is one of the better companies right now to go with, because their video specs are top notch and they're excellent, and they don't really try to gimp you on those. So that's something that's super important. If you're interested in video, that's the reason why this camera is all kitted out for video, is because it's definitely one of my primary cameras for video. Love using this thing. But overall, you will see that the X-T3 has won won many awards, and it's one of the best cameras in 2019. And in my opinion, it's currently the best camera that Fujifilm makes in their crop sensor lineup. So that's all I have for this video. If you have any questions, please leave in the comments below. I'll definitely go through them and I'll answer them the best I can.